Recording in progress.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Better Sleeping Habits webinar for children under 10 years. So your facilitator for today's webinar is myself, Rebecca Penny. I'm one of the parent support workers for the Starting Well partnership, Wyre Forest. So I'm based at the Brookside Family Hub in Kidderminster and the Half Crown Wood Family Hub in Stourport. And I'm part of the parenting team that provides parenting support that we deliver in the family hubs and out in the community as well. So I'm just going to take you through what our webinar is going to look like today. So we're going to be having to think about why sleep is important and thinking about our own natural body, how it has its own natural body clock, and these are also known as circadian rhythms. So we've got a video to watch around that, just have a little bit of a look about our own natural body clocks and just start to understand those a bit more. So we're also going to have a think about, you know, what might get in the way of sleep, why we might find it difficult to sleep. We're going to have a look as well at the average needs of people's sleep. So thinking about ages and stages of development, does the amount of sleep that's needed for those ages and stages vary? We're also going to have a look at some of the signs of possible sleep deprivation as well, so how they may present. And thinking about the benefits of keeping sleep diaries, how this can be helpful. Thinking about some ideas for some sleepy foods that may help to aid sleep. And thinking about a basic bedtime routine and why these are beneficial, as well as having a few top tips at the end as well. And then we'll look at some signposting and some sources of support as well. And then if you do feel that you have any further questions and you need some more support after this webinar, we'll give you the contact details to get in touch with one of the team as well. So we're just going to start by thinking about why we need sleep. Why is sleep so important? So it's really important for the body to be able to repair itself. So thinking about that physical repair of the body as well as the natural and, you know, thinking socially and emotionally and mentally that repair as well for the body. So it's really important, you know, because we have such busy everyday lives that we really take that time to have, you know, that repair for the body all over, both inside and out. So it's really important for us to be able to focus on those things that we need to do each day, you know, whether it's something small or something big, just having that attention span, just being able to focus what it is that we actually need to do and to be able to put that into practice as well. So it's really important thinking emotionally about our thoughts and our feelings and being able to manage and regulate our own feelings. You know, we have such a wide varied range of emotions and feelings. And so being able to process those and help ourselves to calm down and start to understand those feelings is what's known as self-regulation. And sleep is an important part of being able to take that on board. So it's really important as well for us to be able to relax, to just get some more headspace, for us to be able to think more clearly. So again, that really comes into that focus that we want to be able to do, just focusing on those things that are important to us. So we also need to have, you know, the physical and mental strength as well. So, you know, just to be part of our everyday lives, you know, just having the strength to get through that day, get through the week. It might be a busy working week that we've got, you know, children might have a busy week at school, you know, so somewhere along the lines, we need to have that degree of strength to be able to do our things that we do every day. So processing information is really, really important. You know, we have so much stimulus throughout the day, you know, and the way that the brain manages to process that information is when we're sleeping. So, you know, that might be where we have those dreams about things that we've done, you know, recently. It might be, you know, that we don't always remember our dreams, but the brain is still processing and filtering all of that stimulus that we've had throughout the day. And so growth overall, so you know, we've talked physically and mentally. You know, physically, a lot of growth happens when we're sleeping. Children especially go through phases of having quite big growth spurts as well. So having that adequate sleep is really, really important for that. And then, you know, just again, you know, for the mind and the brain to develop as well, it's really important. You know, as children grows, the brain grows as well. So being able to have that sleep, that adequate sleep that's needed for that growth is really important. So we're going to think now a little bit more about our own body's natural clock. So thinking about our own circadian rhythms, everybody is very different and unique. And so, you know, our body clocks might vary, you know, because we are so different. But we've got a video to show just to kind of explain a little bit more about circadian rhythms and why, you know, keeping our body clocks in tune is really, really important. So I'm just going to share on next screen. Let's have a look. So we should now be able to see a blank screen that's got just a few stars. And I'll press play and hopefully we should be able to hear it.
How do you know when it's time to sleep or time to wake up in the morning? More powerful than any alarm clock are your own circadian rhythms, 24-hour cycles of biological processes that exist in every living thing. They keep your body functioning on schedule, day and night, wherever you are. And the key to it all is a bunch of cells in the retina of the eye called photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. Whilst the eye's rod and cone cells are responsible for vision, these retinal ganglion cells detect the brightness of our surroundings and send that information through the optic nerve to the suprachiasmatic nuclei, the brain's master clock. The master clock coordinates all the tiny clocks that govern the behaviour of the cells throughout the body. Taking light as its cue, the master clock determines a continuous cycle of physiological changes within our cells, including the production of hormones that prepare our bodies for waking and sleeping hours. Experiments show that when a person is kept entirely in the dark, their circadian rhythm hardly alters, keeping more or less to a 24-hour day. But seeing too much or too little light, or receiving light at the wrong times of day, can leave the master clock confused as to the time of day. This upsets the rhythm of our cells and impacts on our health and well-being. It's a real problem for people who work at night, those with sleep disorders, and also those with certain visual impairments that prevent light reaching those light-detecting ganglion cells. Studies have shown that disruptions to our natural rhythms put an extraordinary strain on the body, increasing the risk of a number of serious diseases, including cancer, heart disease, type 2 diabetes and depression. It can also impair your ability to think, which is why, here at Oxford, we're researching whether delaying the start of the school day by an hour or two to better suit the body clock of the average teenager could improve their exam results. Anyone for a lie-in? You may not be able to hear it ticking, but you can certainly feel your body clock at work. To learn more about the science of sleep and circadian rhythms, visit www.oxfordsparks.ox.ac.uk.
Okay, so that was quite interesting to see, you know, why it's really important just to take notice of your own sort of body clock and understand it a little bit more, you know, and especially noticing that body clock within your children as well. So it was just saying, you know, even just slight changes to everyday routines can have quite a big impact on our body clocks. You know, sometimes those changes we're not always in control of. So sometimes, when you do see that, oh, I was going to say we've lost the light, so hopefully it should come back on. But hopefully you should be able to start to notice those changes within your children's behaviours. That might be an indication that they are sleep deprived. Okay. So we're going to have a think of what might get in the way of sleep. So we were saying, we have got very busy lives in today's society, especially with children. We see that a lot of children do things like after school clubs, social play dates and things with friends. And, you quite often find, sometimes as parents that your children have got more of a social life than you have. So, sometimes, it can be quite a fast paced week for all of the family. Again, sometimes these things we can't always, manage and keep on top of. So just to be aware, of kind of how your week is looking and being realistic as to think about, is it manageable? Screen times and electronics, we live in very much a virtual world nowadays. Even at school, I think you'll find, a degree of your children's work is done online. As much as when they're in a structured educational setting, it is more monitored. We are finding more and more that a lot of the time our children will then want to come home and virtually connect with their friends as well. So we are finding, again, we are having more and more screens that are being incorporated really into our lives. So it's important because to think about this in terms of children and their sleep, because the screens and electronics will actually emit what's known as a blue light, which is then a stimulant for the brain, and that then reduces the amount of melatonin that's produced early evening for that wind down for bedtime. So we do try to encourage, if screens and electronics can be turned off, sort of at least an hour really before bedtime, it's going to be more beneficial for your children. So sometimes people are quite sensitive with their hearing, what's going on sort of auditory around them. So just take that into consideration when thinking about bedtimes. Is it that your child is sharing a room with other siblings? Are they having the window open and there's things going on outside? Just taking into consideration that environment as a whole can then sometimes have an impact on what might get in the way of sleep. A lot of children have, worries or anxieties. We quite often find as we're tucking our little ones into bed that this is the time when they don't want to go to sleep, they want to talk. It might be that you can find that time earlier in the day, or find other ways that your children can let out those anxieties and worries and thoughts that they might have. But yeah, sometimes we find this happens just before bedtime when they're starting to feel a bit calmer and relaxed. And they just want that one-to-one time to sometimes talk through those worries and anxieties. So there's also separation anxiety, sometimes with younger children, sometimes with older children. Again, sometimes this can be, whether they've had past trauma, and again, if they're anxious or worried about anything. So again, thinking in terms of your children's ages and stages of development, is there kind of any anxieties around them being separated from you? If you're thinking that, you've co-slept with your child for quite a while, and then all of a sudden, as they're getting older, we're expecting them to sleep in their beds by themselves. Sometimes just what we would class as a slight change can be a huge change for children. So just, again, that's just another thing to think a little bit more about. And then we've got ages and developmental phases as well that children go through. So again, we were saying, in the younger years, there's lots of different developmental stages that children will go through, thinking of their milestones. And then as they do get older, we have that puberty stage as well. And again, these can sometimes then change our children's natural rhythms. You know, sometimes they're aware of these developmental changes and sometimes they're not. So our visual here just outlines, you know, the recommended amount of sleep for people of different ages. So very much younger babies, younger children, they tend to sleep longer. So that's, you know, over a period of 24 hours. You know, in younger children, we will see that they'll nap in the day as well as at night. So they're generally kind of getting that more sort of 12 to 15, maybe 16, 17 hours of sleep generally. You know, as they get a bit older, that will start to decrease. But again, you kind of average in a good sort of maybe 8 to 10, 11 hours maybe, to be classed as what's known as adequate amount of sleep. And then as we do get older into adulthood and then into the older years, you know, this we do sometimes see that this decreases then even more. But again, you know, this is just a rough guide, and it's just important to remember that each child is different and unique. And so, you know, your one child isn't going to be the same as your other child. You know, we quite often see that there's a variation, you know, within siblings. So it's important to try not to compare, you know, one to the other really. So looking out then at some of the possible signs of sleep deprivation. So you might notice that your child, you know, is quite highly strung, quite emotional, you know, have that range of different emotions. So again, it might be that they're struggling to self-regulate. They have quite a lot of outbursts of varied behaviour. They don't necessarily understand why they're behaving in that way, or feeling sad or upset, or that they're struggling with anything in particular. So especially with younger children, this might be an area that they might be needing extra support with. So also might be that you're struggling to get them up in the morning, especially if they've been up into the night as well, or they've woken up a number of times in the night, you know, that they don't necessarily want to get up the next morning, and you're finding that's a difficult period of the day. So they might have difficulty to listen to basic instructions or information, being able to process that information and those instructions. You know, can they put them into a logical order to be able to do what you've asked them to do? And then we've got a change in appetite. So this can be quite varied. We sometimes see, you know, if children's natural rhythms are disrupted, you know, those changes to, you know, the different habits that we have in the day. You know, you might notice that your child is eating slightly less than they normally would, or it could be the other end of the spectrum where they're finding that they're just constantly wanting to eat and they'll pick at anything. So again, you know, just any change that you notice in appetite can be an indication of sleep deprivation. So we've got a lack of focus and control. So as well as, you know, not possibly being able to, you know, follow instructions or listen to clear instructions being given, you know, they might not have that attention span to even listen to the whole of the conversation you're having with them. You know, you might find that they are quite manic in their behaviours. They can't necessarily sit still. You know, and basic things, you know, like balance and coordination, they might be struggling with as well. Communication is again another one sometimes parents might notice, especially if they are tired. They might be feeling quite lethargic and finding it a struggle, you know, to even string a sentence together, which is where their speech might slur, be very slow and mumbled. Or, you know, if we were saying, you know, that they are at the other end of the spectrum, where rather than being hyper and being very slow, they're hyperactive, which means they're very frenzied, very manic. You know, and they might be talking that fast that you can't quite understand what they're saying. You might notice your child that is napping more in the day or early evening. You know, younger children, we do tend to see them still nap, but if you notice that increasing and excessive timing of it as well, You might notice if they're sleeping for longer than they normally would in the day, this might be an indication as well. And we were just saying about the energy levels as well, you know, so it might be that they have a lot of energy. It could be that they're really struggling for energy. So, you know, thinking about those energy levels as well, are there any changes to those? And it might be that you don't necessarily notice it yourself. It might be, you know, sort of in that educational setting that teachers or nursery workers notice this more so than parents. So sleep diaries can be quite good to kind of note down any of these things that you might notice. They're good for kind of identifying, you know, any parts of the day that go really well for you, and then identifying, you know, any parts of the day that you might struggle with as a family, or anywhere where, you know, any part of the day that maybe your little one's anxious about or not sure about. So these are quite good to do over a length of time, and just to have that visual and to look over them and review them every now and then can sometimes be enough just to highlight some areas that you might want to make some changes. And again, there's lots, you know, that you can download off the internet if you wanted to. Or alternatively, you know, if you're quite creative as a family, you might want to design one yourself as well. You don't necessarily have to have it as a table form. You know, it might just be that you've got a notepad and pen or a board, just somewhere where you can make some notes might be enough as well. So there are some foods that have been researched and have shown to have some good links with being able to boost melatonin and really help to aid sleep. So the first one is actually almonds, which contain magnesium. So these are promoting both sleep and muscle relaxation, and they can also help to keep blood sugar levels stable throughout the night. So again, you know, trying to keep that consistent sleep throughout the night. Bananas are really good because they've got high levels of potassium and magnesium. And then they also are high in an amino acid called tryptophan, which again is needed to help aid sleep. So blending a banana in some milk or soya milk is a really nice bedtime drink. You know, they can either maybe eat banana as well, that would work. Some dairies, so thinking about yogurt, some milk, some cheese, again, contains that amino acid that we were just talking about. And calcium is really good, is a really good form of stress relief as well. And as much as there is superstition out there about eating cheese before bedtime and it giving you nightmares, it is just a myth. So that's always good to know. So we've also got some oatmeal or porridge. So that's really rich in calcium. So that's stress reliever we were just talking about, and magnesium, phosphorus, silicon, and potassium. So the silicon is a natural expanding binding agent, which again helps to keep you fuller for longer. Which again, if eaten before bedtime, can help to keep you asleep for longer as well. Cherries are also known to be really good, particularly very sour and tart cherries. So these are really good and can find to boost the melatonin, which is that chemical released within the brain and within the body to really help to aid and boost sleep and to help the body wind down. So again, it might be that you choose to have this blended in a drink. You can eat them dried or frozen as well. And then lastly, we've got cereal. So that's our complex carbohydrate, increasing the amount of tryptophan in the bloodstream. But just be mindful if you are thinking about cereal before bed, that we don't want to be giving sugary cereals. We don't want to be giving our children a sugar rush before they go to bed. So our picture here just shows a very simple bedtime routine, if this is something that's new and something you've been thinking about. So research has been looking into bedtime routines, and it shows that children who follow bedtime routines are more likely to go to sleep earlier, take less time to fall asleep, inevitably sleep longer, and then wake up less during the night. And studies have shown that the benefits of sleep quality are actually still seen years later in children who have followed bedtime routines since they were young. So the key is, if you can, start those bedtime routines at a very early age and continue them. That's fantastic. But it's also important to remember that if this is something that's new to you, it's still a really good idea to try. You're never too old to try something new. So, even if your children are slightly older, still think about those routines if you are thinking that they'll be beneficial. And there is a lot more guidance and information around that on the Sleep Foundation org website as well. So we've just got now then a few more top tips that might help to aid sleep and to help you feel a bit more confident in tackling this area. So we've already said about the screen times, the screen time is going to emit that blue light that's then going to stimulate that part of the brain, which then reduces the amount of melatonin that is produced. So switching off devices at least an hour before bedtime, just to give the body and the mind a chance to wind down before going to sleep. So you could always try replacing screen time with some more calming activities. So you could always find some of those things that you might enjoy doing together. So it might be settling down, just enjoying some favourite stories together. It might be just settling down for a puzzle, working together on a nice puzzle. Maybe finding some nice quiet time, somewhere quiet in the house to do some mindfulness or breathing exercises, or maybe some yoga. If you're quite creative, having some time to do some colouring together or some drawing. And this is quite nice for children if they're not able to verbalise those anxieties and worries. A lot of children like to draw, and so you can talk about those, talk about their drawings if they are, sort of putting them into pictures more so than verbalising those anxieties and worries. So it might be that you want to try a new skill together. We find crocheting and knitting is becoming a lot more popular. So this might be a new skill that you want to learn together as a family. Or it might be that you do some simple construction with something like some Duplo or some Lego and things like that, and get creative as well. I think one thing that families have mentioned in the past is, keeping consistent can be hard, especially because we're all so busy in today's society. We quite often find that both parents in the family do go out to work. You sometimes have childcare and things like that to take into consideration. But, thinking about bedtime routines and those changes that you want to possibly make, it's really, really important to try and stay consistent. So keeping those same steps every night if you can, or for as many nights as realistic and as possible, just so that you can get all the benefits that you possibly can from this. So the more that you can mirror those changes, for both parents to take part in these changes is really important. If you can take a whole family approach on these changes, they will be more inclined to work. Your children are going to be more inclined to follow them as well if we're mirroring and role modeling those changes that we want to see. You're going to get less chance of them then wanting to resist those changes. If your children are younger, think about just keeping any kind of new routine, quite short, quite sweet as well. Sometimes when we incorporate a routine, it's all very new and exciting in the beginning. But obviously, as time goes on, we don't want to be making it hard work for them. So thinking about a bedtime routine, just trying at least half an hour maximum, maybe only a little longer if they're having a bath, and sometimes delaying and making routines longer, it makes them harder to implement over the long term. So it might be, that there are routines that you want to incorporate into the day as well as the night. Sometimes if you can find a good day routine, it will follow nicely into a nice nighttime routine as well. So just making sure that they're set really clearly. Try and encourage children to get lots of exercise, be out in the sunlight, get that vitamin D, really help them and encourage them to burn off any extra energies that they might have. That's the phone going off. So it's important to listen to your child, as much as ultimately, you are the ones in charge. Take on board their concerns and how they're feeling about these new changes. If they're kind of feeling that something might not be working, is your child old enough to be able to talk together, to tweak any changes, look at ways that things can be different for them, just to make it a smoother transition and more enjoyable as well. So it's important as well, as much as there might be changes we're putting in place, just keeping the basics. So, thinking about the bedroom being dark, again, boosting those levels of melatonin. If your child is scared of the dark, it might be that you can have a dim night light for them, but just trying to create that relaxing environment. Just trying to make sure that the environment is quiet as well. Trying to remind the whole household just to keep noise levels down if little ones have been tucked into bed. And thinking about, if changes do need to be made to, new routines or anything like that, just thinking about implementing one change at a time. So we don't want to overwhelm children by adding too many changes all at once. Sometimes you do have things like school holidays. You might go away on holiday where, bedtimes can then be put maybe a little bit later, but they do need to come back down to a certain time in ready to go back to school. So just think about shifting those bedtimes by sort of 10-15 minutes at a time, just doing it very, very gradually, will again help with that transition. So if you do want any more extra information after today's webinar, the links that we've got here provide some really good sound information, more around sleep and ways to aid sleep as well. And if you do have any further questions and you want to get in touch with one of our parenting team, you're more than welcome to go onto our Starting Well Worcester website, where again we have lots of information on there, and it will give you the contact details to get in touch with one of the team if you do need to speak to anybody further. But we also will have contact details as we email these webinars out to you guys as well. So thank you for taking part in today's webinar, and we'll hopefully see you all in our family hubs very soon.